Good evening, Bearcat community. We are so glad that you are joining us tonight. Hopefully we'll get a good audience tonight like we did on the last one. My name is Mercedes Meyer and I'm our Director of Communications. I am joined by, hopefully you recognize these faces, Dr. Susan Bone, our superintendent, and Earl Husfeld, our CFO. Thanks guys for joining us.
Happy to be here.
Yes.
Glad to be again, Mercedes.
They always love it when I say, hey, let's do a Facebook Live. And the answer is always, yeah, let's do it. Dr. Bone, of course, been with us for, is this your sixth school year?
Finishing my sixth.
Finishing your sixth school year. Mr. Husfeld, we won't say how long you've been a CFO in a school district, but I think it is approaching.
Had dark brown hair.
Okay, dark brown hair. Okay, good. While we're kind of building an audience, I thought it's May. Today's May Day, everybody. We just counted 16 and a half days left of school, not that we're counting. And so May is crazy, but this past week in Bearcat country has been pretty exciting. And so I thought maybe we'd go over some really fun things that have happened while we're waiting for people to get on. We did this Facebook Live part 1 in March and got a pretty good response from that. And lots of questions, got some good feedback. They loved us, you guys. And so they said, they like the format though. I think it's easy for people to turn it on and watch it. And it's a lot easier to explain than to write in paragraph form. So we're glad to oblige and come back and give them a part 2 to Bearcat Budget 101. So past week, pretty exciting. This is what success looks like in a lot of ways in one week's time, which is pretty cool. So our boys golfer Braden Stokes just finished yesterday at the UIL state tournament for golf. He finished 22nd out of 72 players. Great job to Braden.
Sophomore.
A sophomore, yeah, young. So here we go, Braden. Get 2 more years. Let's do it. You can see the 4 track and field athletes are headed to Austin. Actually, we're doing a send-off for them tomorrow at 11:15 in front of Aledo High School. For track and field in Austin State Championships on Friday. We have a couple trying to defend some medals and hopefully win some other medals, so that's exciting. Aledo Anglers, a very fun group for Aledo High School. Yep, also state qualifiers. And then really exciting is our UIL One Act Play. They won their regional in Lubbock a week ago, I believe, or not quite a week ago, last Thursday, and they will be in the One Act Championship next week. Or do I have my weeks mixed up? Next week in Austin. And so lots of hitting the road to Lubbock and Austin.
Friday.
Okay, next Friday. For these groups that we're really proud of, our kids succeeding at high levels. And once you get into May, it's fast and furious.
Lots of senior fun.
So lots of senior fun too. Lots of things happening. And then we'll have a quick reminder that we're going to take this moment with the audience to beg you. Not really. Register your kids.
Please register.
Yeah, please.
So what registration helps, I'm speaking to myself too as a parent, what registration helps us do is put our master schedules together, make sure that we're staffing to the level that we need for students. And then what it does for students in secondary schools, it's kind of first come, first serve on the classes that you choose. Mm-hmm. So you really do want to get yourself registered so you know that your name's in the system to get those classes in the master schedule. And then we also already start at the elementary level putting class rosters together as well. So it's very, very helpful for us to be able to hire the best right now for our kids in the fall, rather than find out that we've got a lot of extra kids at the last minute and go hire them.
So AledoISD.org/register. Get on and register. Yes, we'd love for you to register by May 15th. That's 2 weeks. If you are an existing parent, it is so easy because you just go through and fill out a couple of forms. If you need to update a couple of phone numbers or whatever you can, put in that proof of residency, and then you're ready to go. And as a parent of high school students, Dr. Bone,
yes.
High school students, your parents have to register you. What you did for classes was just picking classes. If you want to actually get those classes, you need to be registered.
You speak as if you think some high school students are watching this, but maybe they are.
They probably aren't. But parents.
But parents of high school students.
Of high school students.
Yes.
Okay. Hey, you never know. So we did this again in March. We did kind of a budget 101, just some very basic. So I thought we'd go back over some of those things that we talked about. We had a few questions come in, so thank you guys for submitting your questions. So they'll kind of be weaved into some of this work that we're doing now, but just kind of review a little bit of what we did last time. Let's start with the $1 million question that is very hard to explain. Mr. Husfeld, because you are the money man, how are schools funded? Give us some school finance 101.
Okay. On the screen we have here some of the different components of the revenue for the school district. our general fund budget, we're talking about our general fund budget, it's about $83 million in total. So this is the revenue side of that. This is for 22-23 year. This is 23-24 year. So the largest component in our school districts comes from local taxes, local revenue. So our property taxes that we pay locally and so forth. So here you see in 22-23 is about 67% of our budget. 23-24 it went down to 62%. That's primarily because of the homestead exemption going up to $100,000, and then the tax rate declining, decreasing, dropping.
We'll get to that later.
And we're going to talk more about that later, yes. So there's less money coming from the state. The corresponding offset to that is you see the state portion, state revenue is going up from 32% last year to 36, almost 37% this year. A very small amount of it is federal revenue, SHARS reimbursement, things like that and stuff. But the major component starting point for the revenue, state revenue district, is made up of a basic allotment that we get that hasn't changed since 2019. Then the other part of it is our property values, and then students, the number of students. That's what drives the revenue, majority of things that drives the revenue in the district. Then on the other side of the coin are the appropriations, or the expenditures that we have. So as we've mentioned many times in board meetings, we're a people business. We're a service business. So you see our payroll cost is almost 77, almost 78%. In most districts, it's around 80% or a little more than that. In our particular district, you see professional and contracted services, we contract out our custodial services. So if we, a lot of districts have those as employees of the district, and ours we contract out. So if we'd included those as employees, ours would be about 82% of our payroll cost. Other items that are in the contracted services are like our utilities. We've got some more slides later. We'll show you about how much we spend in utilities and things like that. Our Robin Hood payment, our Chapter 49 payment that we make, that's included in professional and contracted services. Supplies and materials, the 4.9%, that's just pretty self-explanatory. Other operating expenses, the 4.2%, that is predominantly our property casualty insurance or insurance premiums we pay out of there. Staff development, things like that and stuff. But far and away, the biggest portion of that is our property insurance premium that we pay. And capital outlay, the 0.3%, that's for like equipment. If we buy vehicles or things like that and stuff out of the general fund. This is not bond funds or debt service funds. This is general fund that we're talking about. So if we buy an ag truck for the ag department or something like that, that would be the capital outlay. So a very small portion of that.
So it wraps into the basic allotment, which you referenced just a second ago. And what does that mean? The
basic allotment is set by the state legislature, the state of Texas, and it's kind of the starting point that determines the revenue that school districts receive. It's $6,160 per student. There's hold harmless provisions. So you get into all kinds of different things to determine what that is.
Just get taller and taller.
So, yes. But we're not going to get into that. This is not the forum for that. But it's the starting point that generates how much money that school districts get to keep and or generate.
And so one of the things that we've discussed, and you'll see kind of woven throughout this today, is that hasn't changed since 2019.
Correct.
Yeah,
yes.
That's the last time that.
And the legislature has to change that. And as we said, that hadn't changed since 2019.
Okay. Pass it off. There we go. One of the more confusing parts too, and you kind of referenced this just briefly, is that the tax rate that we pay, you see one number on your property tax bill, but it's actually made up of two different rates that are combined. So will you talk about that?
Right, sure. And so those two different rates on your tax bill, or two different parts of the rate on your tax bill, are aligned to two different parts of our budget. And there's some rules related to how we can spend the parts of our budget. We will get to some new content, but we felt like we really needed to cover this again, because this is another sort of confusing part of what we do in our finances. So we have two parts of two buckets of our budget. One is called the maintenance and operations side of our budget. The other is called our interest and sinking side of the budget, sometimes called debt service. We'll talk about that one in a second. So on the maintenance and operations side, this is what we use to run the district on a day-to-day basis. We pay our payroll out of this. We pay for utilities. We pay for those contracted services and insurance that Mr. Husfeld was just talking about. All of that comes out of our operations side of the tax rate and side of the budget, maintenance and operations side. over here, and that money is recaptured by the state if it exceeds a certain threshold. So there is some Robin Hood or recapture that goes back from this to the state on the maintenance and operations side of the budget. On this side of the budget, in this bucket called interest and sinking, also called debt service, is where we borrow money to pay for really large capital expenditures like brand new school buildings, school buses that cost about $140,000 each now, and many of those. All of that happens here on this debt service side of the budget, or interest and sinking side of the budget. So on this side of the budget, we are, first of all, to borrow any money, we have to have a bond election and ask our voters for approval to do that. We borrow the money and then pay it down on this side of the budget. So they are two separate. It's kind of like a mortgage. Yeah, kind of like a mortgage. Yeah. So on this side of the, what we can't do with INS money is we can't pay for teachers. We can't buy paper. We can't pay for insurance. We cannot use it to fill operating budget gaps. It is totally separate and must be used by law for those large capital expenditures we were talking about. One thing about interest and sinking is that it is not recaptured by the state. So it stays here to service the debt that we have to take on as a growing district.
Okay. So I'm going to kind of try to wrap it up again for you guys. So we'll clarify that the new McKinney Elementary, we're so excited to open it this fall. That would be a part of that INS side, that debt service side. And maybe next year we'll do a Facebook Live from the new McKinney library. That would be really fun. But what we're really kind of discussing today, and in the communication that you've gotten from the school district over the last year or so, thank you for reading all of those, would be more about the M&O side. But like I said earlier, you've probably also seen that has decreased and our overall tax rate. So if you look at 18-19 all the way down to 23-24, it has decreased 38 cents total. The total tax rate has. It's actually the lowest it's been in more than 20 years. So you actually might have opened your bill and realized that you're not paying as much as you thought you might be, even if your values go up because your tax rate is going down. Right. And but the M&O side, Earl, correct me if I'm wrong, is set by the state.
Yes, there's certain prescribed calculations that the state dictates. Certain prescribed calculations that the state dictates how we set that tax rate and how we calculate that tax rate working with TEA. So the school board really has very little discretion over the M&O side. Debt service side or the INS side, yes, but on the M&O side, no, ma'am.
Okay. And then the INS is what you will for a bond election for.
Exactly.
That the public has to approve.
And the public has to approve the bond election, and then the board sets the tax rate to repay or to cover those mortgage payments that we make each year.
Okay, so you guys are just really good at these segues. This is really working out. So we get another question all the time, really. And that is, especially this year, as we passed a bond, and I guess that was really last year. It all runs together. 2023 bond is, if you see your property values rise, how come we're in a deficit or don't have enough money to cover that deficit, or not keeping so much more money?
Right. So we talked about this last time. We think it's something that's critical. It's one of those counterintuitive pieces of the school finance system in Texas. So we thought we needed to go over this again. So the question we get is, I can see that that I'm paying more in taxes every year, not necessarily because of the rate, because the rate's gone down, but because my values are going up, and my increased values times the rate has caused me to send more and more money to Aledo ISD, is what our bills look like, right? Mine does too, since my husband and I are homeowners here. But so let's kind of describe why that doesn't mean the district is getting more money when you're paying more in your local property taxes. So this right here is a depiction of the total funding that we get basically per student. It's a little simplified. It's a little like the basic allotment. Again, a little simplified, but so you have here the total per funding amount that we get. Depicted on this slide in the orange is the local share. So this is the local property tax levy. And so the state has set this amount here that we will get per student. And so whatever is not paid for by the local property tax levy, the state sends us funding to basically close that gap between the student per student amount that we're supposed to get to fund our schools and what we levy from the local property tax owner. So what happens if in a place like Aledo ISD and really all over the state of Texas, values have really shot through the roof in the last 5 years or so, especially. So obviously not because of the tax rate, but because of the values of property that the appraisal district has appraised in the district, you have an increase in the amount of the tax levy that the school district is getting. So you have to keep the same per student funding level from the state still set there, doesn't change. And so as the local property tax levy increases, the state keeps the amount the same and just decreases the amount that the state sends to the district in revenue. So as this local funding from local taxpayers increases, the investment of the state into our school district shrinks and decreases. So you can see here, I mean, there's a whole lot that they don't have to send to us anymore. So what do they do with that? They put that in their general fund. In their general fund,
general public education fund.
No, just to use whatever the state needs. They've got lots of expenditures on prisons and highways and all of that, right? So they can just use that money that they don't have to send to us anymore because our taxpayers, our local taxpayers, are paying more, and they keep that in the state budget.
Okay, very good. So we also keep a fund balance. This is something you hear a lot. If you pay attention to the legislature, you hear a rainy day fund all the time. And so we keep a fund balance. It's not really a rainy day fund. You might think that would be what it is just because it would make sense. We both have budgets. We have, money that we have set aside. And so, Mr. Huspel, will you just explain what that fund balance means to us? This is fascinating to me because I've been in this for a while and I feel like I know a lot. I don't know nearly as much as you do. But the last time we did one of these, this was what probably shocked me the most, and I learned something and I didn't know. And so will you explain why we have this fund balance and why we don't just go, hey, we have a deficit, let's grab money from the fund balance like it's a rainy day fund?
The fund balance is important for any school district to have because as what Mercedes is talking about is school districts don't all get a certain amount of money each month. In other words, like we pay our staff, part of our staff every other Friday, other parts, the majority of our staff get paid every month, once every month. We don't receive money from the state every month. So even though we're not receiving them in the state, we still have to pay our bills every month. So we need that fund balance to provide for a mechanism in the funds to pay the bills that we have. Plus also, we don't receive, there's some months over the course of the year, like between November and March, we don't receive any money from the state because that's when the majority of mortgage companies or individuals pay their property taxes. The state knows that, so they take advantage of that. So we don't get any money then during those times of the year. And then other times of the year, we'll get some money later on in the summer when we're not collecting near as many property taxes. So we use that fund balance at different times during the year to cover our bills, monthly bills and monthly payroll and stuff. Also, it's important, as you mentioned earlier, we're a growing district. We had a bond election. So when the school district sells bonds or we issue that debt after our taxpayers have approved it, they look at our school district just like and see how our credit worthy, what kind of a credit rating do we have, much like if you're building a home, your banker or mortgage company is going to look and see how much we can borrow or loan for that. Well, the better fund balance that we have, the more financially strong that we are, we get a better interest rate and stuff on that as well. So that saves our taxpayers long term over the 30 years life of repaying that bonds as well. The other thing is we talked briefly about our property and casualty insurance. We'll talk a little more about that as well. The deductibles, the portion that we're covering ourselves before the insurance pays, those have gone up over years as well as buildings have gotten more expensive and to try to offset some of that premium increase. So we will cover a portion of that liability or that loss ourselves. So we need fund balance to help cover that. Hopefully a tragedy never occurs with our buildings, but if it does, then we can have the funds to pay that or to cover that. So there's a lot of reasons like that about why school districts need a fund balance to maintain operations over the course of the year.
And not just dip right into it and dip into it over and over and over again.
Exactly. And a lot of districts like now, we are this current year, we're spending more. We have a deficit budget, so we're spending more than what our projected revenues are. For the current year, we projected that. Last year, we'll talk a little, coming year for 24-25. You see that in the newspaper around a lot of school districts are doing that, and some of the reasons for that is what we're talking to you about this evening and stuff. So there again, we use that to supplement our budget and so forth as district grows. When we open new facilities, things like that and stuff, there's some operational costs that you have when you open a school that you don't have every other year. So there's a lot of reasons and a lot of things like that where you need a fund balance to cover and to assist.
Just one other thing. Obviously, we're stewards of taxpayer dollars, and our school board is too. So we're very fiscally conservative. We're very risk averse, and we want to be prepared for any significant issues that we might have. But we do have a fund balance policy. So the board has told us, the fund balance can't get below this threshold of our operating expenditures, because we know we do have to cash roll the district in some months to pay our payroll and all of our expenses, for instance, and just also because it's fiscally responsible to maintain a savings account in case of a bad situation where we need to dip in.
So we are growing, and I think it's kind of neat, actually, to me, that we are this vast operation. We have employees who do so many different things. We, of course, have teachers, and we have administrators, and you see that. We have people who do pest control, and we have master electricians, and we have, it's amazing to me because I'd like to say we operate almost like a little town. And so will you go over just how vast that is and what that means for our budget and the expenditures that we have?
Sure. So since we're talking about finance here, when you have a pretty large operation like this, projected $84 million budget for next year, 1,000 employees, 8,200 students, and all these people doing all of these things, it's an expensive endeavor. So when the inflation that we talk about has been happening since in the last 5 years or so, it's pretty significant us in some significant areas. Now, we buy toilet paper and we buy copy paper and all of that, but we thought we'd highlight some things that are kind of our big expenditures so that people can kind of get a feel for the scale of the expenditure. It is pretty big. So I thought we'd start first with talking a little bit about transportation. So we do have 130 square miles in the district. We're pretty large.
That's very large.
And some of our students live kind of out in the hinterlands, and so we do run our buses to go pick up all students as they need, unless they're within 2 miles of a school and don't have a dangerous path. And so we drove in 22-23 about 573,000 miles on our buses and vehicles, which is pretty incredible. That's a lot. And then, so our annual cost of gas for that year in 22-23 was about $481,000. And that has increased significantly. So what you can see on this screen is that the increase in fuel prices for us to run all of our transportation system has been about almost 189% increase over about the last 5 years. And the reason we're talking about 5 years is because that was the last time that the state increased our funding to on the operation side of the budget to run things. So pretty significant. Another one is related to how many square feet we have in the district. So we have 1.6 million square feet in the district and growing.
Yep.
So this doesn't include Lynn McKinney Elementary, which will be open in the fall. So we'll add to that number pretty soon. We obviously have to have property casualty insurance for those buildings to protect them. And you can see here that our premium, our cost for insurance, just property insurance, was about $1.6 million in 23-24. And that was an increase in the last about 5 years of 1.2 million, 329% increase. Again, it's not anything that anyone watching doesn't know because you're experiencing it at home and in your own business. It's just, it's
on such a large scale.
And it's on a very large scale, right? So we're talking large numbers. And then if you look at utilities costs, again, we're all feeling this at home, but we spend about $2.4 million on utilities in the district because we have lots of schools to run. And that's, almost a 56% increase in the last 5 years. So large scale, large numbers.
So we talked about the funding that we receive and that we do get state funding, and some of it does help cover these costs, but it really doesn't all cover the cost, whether it's something that we are required to do or some things that we're not even required to do, but we have expectations from our community that we should do. And so, so we'll talk about safety and security is a good one, and transportation. Let's talk about the funding for those. And so these are pretty big scale items in what we do every day.
Right. So safety and security, obviously an incredibly important thing to do, the most important thing we do. And so we have a budget of about $1 million every year in the last couple of years as we've grown to do safety and security in the district. So this is not building safety improvements. This is just operations annually, about $1 million.
And salaries.
In salaries. Yeah. This does include all of our police officers. Obviously, we have our own Aledo ISD Police Department. And so this is the expenditure for that. In this last session in 2023, the legislature did send to school districts a little bit of operations money for safety and security. And so we, in this school year, 23-24, our allocation from the state was about $241,000. So you can see the incredible difference there, that locally, just in our general budget, our general fund, we're having to make up, almost $800,000 of the safety and security. Again, we already had a police department. There are a lot of new requirements from the state from 2023 for safety and security, which we think are great. We were doing most all of them, but the funding to do all of them has not flowed on an operations basis. We also know that our community expects us to have an armed police officer on campuses, and so that's the model that we use. Right. And the funding that we receive from the state, which is $15,000 per campus, is not enough for us to pay payroll for a police officer on a campus, for instance. That's just an example in this funding. So we thought this was a good example. Another example that we have is our transportation system. So this is not a requirement from the state. So though most school districts in the state of Texas do have a transportation system, lots of buses, it's not something that the state requires us to do, except that we do have some students who are in our special education program who do qualify for special transportation, and that is required. So but we believe that in our 130 square mile school district, this is an expectation of our community.
Pretty important.
And it'd be pretty hard for a lot of our parents to get their kids to school, and even our staff to get their own kids to school too. So you can see what we spend on transportation in a year. Our budget year 22-23, it was about $4 million. And the annual funding provided from the state is only about $625,000 that year. So you can see, again, it's a $3.4 million delta that we just have to find in our budget to take care of this transportation, because it really is a community expectation.
It's important. Very important. So just kind of wrapping all those up, we're seeing this record inflation. And so this kind of shows you that basic allotment has stayed the same. So you're feeling it at home, we're feeling it in a school district, and we're staying here stagnant with that basic allotment number that they've calculated per student for.
Right. And as Mr. Hesfeld mentioned, it is these state legislators who are the only ones who can vote to increase the basic allotment. There's nothing that we can do locally to increase that state per pupil funding.
Yeah.
And so it stated
and they meet every other year.
0% increase. It stated a 0% increase, and inflation has increased, as we've seen, 20%.
Let's hope that number just starts going down. Can we just,
we'll see,
wave our magic wand?
That would be nice.
That would be nice. So one of the things that we do is communicating to our families. We advocate for more funding for public schools, and honestly, it's not even just about us. It's about public schools in general across the state. We're all in the same boat together, really. And so, when you talk about that, hopefully you guys read our emails, or you see our social media posts, or you are watching this Facebook Live. But being informed is a big part of that, so we appreciate that. But this never really ends. In fact, I was actually thinking a minute ago, we're going to be in a few months making priorities for the next legislative session.
Yes.
And one just ended, and so we talk about that advocacy and what that really means for us in our community.
Yeah, so this is something that we do all the time, really. It can get busier during a legislative session in Austin because there are decisions being made, real decisions being made at that time. So it's important for us to communicate with all our lawmakers at that time. But really what advocacy means is communicating. It's communicating with our the state senators and representative who represent us here in our community, and advocating for what we think our community needs. So it's in the form of emails and text messages and phone calls and visits. And so I know we have a few photos here. We also don't just advocate just for school stuff. We advocate for our community. I think especially because we're a growing community and there's still a lot to establish with respect to what is this place going to be? What do we want it to be? And what can we do to work together to set it up so it grows in the way that it's still the amazing place that it is, even when it's a little bigger, because that takes a lot of planning and honestly advocacy with those who represent us at the state level. So it's really, so you can see here, we take parents with us, we take principals, we go with the Parker County Chamber. They have a day at the Capitol. We all go together to represent our community. There's a picture up here where we were in a senator's office, and one of our principals is sitting there with members of our ESD, so our Emergency Services District, our fire department, because they had something that was really important to them, and we wanted to go and support them because obviously emergency services are critical to our schools and just our community. And so really it's about, for those of you who are listening, you might need a little bit more information. Hopefully we're giving you some here, but it really is, we all work for you. Those who are down in Austin work for us because we elected them. Mm-hmm. And so it's important that they know what our priorities are about schools and everything else. Mm-hmm. So it's just keeping those lines of communication. They live in our communities or nearby, and, you see them out, you talk to them about what it is that you think is important.
Mm-hmm. Like, we don't, believe it or not, build roads. And so we do not to partner with our, local government officials to be in this together on things that we need for our community.
And we have great examples of being able to do that. Mm-hmm. And we're doing that pretty much every day. Yeah. Not just for school stuff, but for anything that our community needs.
Yeah. So let's go back to it's usually end of May, beginning of June, the legislature adjourns. We've been following it closely. We've advocated. We've, asked our families to even advocate for us and things like that. We see that the funding is not look like it's going to be there, but we're hearing about special sessions. Then you guys know we had multiple special sessions, and yet still that basic allotment never was increased. And so at that point, really, probably before the legislative session started, but then really in earnest once we realized that there was no additional funding, we started the planning for the next school year and some for this school year of what can we do, because we are more than likely going to have a deficit. And so will you talk about just kind of how that all
that process
and what that process was?
We did. We early just decided we need to go ahead and cut 10% off the top of our operations mm-hmm. for this school year. So we made that determination. That was very clear. And then I think we had just a couple of positions maybe that we didn't fill when we saw that things weren't looking very good.
And that's in this current
school year, 23-24. Then we convened a group of leaders in the district, some campus principals and directors of other departments, other functions in the district, to sit down and meet weekly mm-hmm. to talk about what are some opportunities that we have. We really wanted to focus on using our limited resources to support our greatest needs, the greatest needs of our students. And so that's sort of where we started from, and then kind of worked down the list of what we might be able to do. And we started with operations mm-hmm. because we knew we wanted to keep it away from staff as much as we could, and from students, of course, and then just kind of went from there.
Mm-hmm. This is not fun work.
It is not.
No,
it is definitely not fun work.
But it's something that we were committed to maintaining, excellence, those exceptional experiences, things like that. And so we did really kind of focus a bit on trying to keep those exceptional experiences and doing some of the operational things first.
And this is obviously, of course, with lots of meetings with our school board, right? So the school board represents all of us in the community. The community votes for those locally elected officials. And so the locally elected officials are trying to reflect what the community expects. Mm-hmm. And so it's where our community is very fiscally conservative. We are too. And so we knew that we could see a deficit coming up and deficits in the future, or projected those. And so it was pretty clear that we're going to have to make some pretty significant cuts to defray that deficit. It wasn't going to be okay to our community or our school board for us to continue having deficit budgets and dip into our fund balance just too deeply mm-hmm. outside of our policy.
So you've seen probably in the news, surely you have, because it's been ongoing for months, really, how many millions of dollars different school districts are cutting or closing schools or cutting positions, or, just there's so much. Different districts have different amounts and different ways they're doing things. And so ours is about $3.8 million for the next school year that we're looking at reducing. And again, very painful work, not fun work, that we've gotten to, but it started really with operational costs. Will you go over what those were?
Sure. Yes. One of the things that helps with this, I think, is that when we adopt our budget, we're looking at multi-year budgets. And so because the legislature meets every couple of years, so when we go through the budget process, we're looking at current year, the next year, and the next couple of years, generally speaking, with different assumptions and things like that and stuff. But that way, we try to be proactive about what we might be seeing coming down the pike and stuff. But we started off when we're looking at, we made some reductions this past summer for the current budget that we're in, 23-24, but then looking forward into the 24-25 budget. And our accounting years from September 1 through August 31st. So we looked at the operational, as you mentioned, Mercedes, operational budget reductions. By operation, we're talking about the operating portions of your budget that the departments have some discretion over. In other words, so like utility costs, you don't have, we can modify behavior, things like, but we don't set the rates, things like that, stuff. We be very aggressive on where we buy our fuel and things like that and stuff, but we don't control those. So we're talking about more of the things that we have discretion over that we can change through how we spend or what we spend it on, things like that and stuff. So in there for the operational reductions, making a 20% reduction in those four discretionary operational budgets for the 24-25 year. You see some other things here on the screen about copies, how we do our printing and so within the district and stuff. Whether we print in color, how we print, where we print, things like that, stuff. Energy management, the set points on utilities in our classrooms and in our buildings. We want them to be comfortable, but yet, within a realm of a set point. Overtime, compensatory time for our staff, and how we manage that, how we monitor that and stuff. We don't want our staff to, first off, to have a lot of overtime because then they're obviously working outside their normal time. So, and stuff. But sometimes of the year that's required. So how can we manage that or work that? It's best to work for our employees as well as less cost for the district as well. Substitute management, substitute teachers and so forth, things like that and stuff. And we'll spend, about $1.2 million for substitute teachers in our district. So our staff have, for a variety of reasons, have absences, things like that and stuff. We have substitute teachers to cover those classes for our staff, for the teachers when they're out, or bus drivers when they're out, or principals when they're out, or whatever type things and stuff. So how we can manage those absences as well. You see their student and staff travel. How often we go, we want our students to have as best experiences that we can and things like that and stuff. Or maybe like on staff development, not everybody go to a conference every year. Maybe we sometimes have the conference here instead of sending people to other places. And those. So all of those type things, as we say, try to stay as far away from the classroom as we can. And these are not the people part of it, but the other operational, non-people related costs that we've looked at in trying to reduce that projected $4 million deficit for 24-25 fiscal year.
Probably a lot of this is stuff we kind of already did. We're just tightening a little bit, or things that other districts already do. Things like that. And so,
in the grand scheme of things, these are not big dollars. Stuff in the grand scheme of things.
Well, because 80% almost of our budget is people, staff. And so obviously that means that we cannot make this big of a adjustment without it affecting staff a little bit.
Right. So we can't find $3.8 million in our budget to reduce in our budget from paper and turning the lights off. Right. We know that. So when we talk about personnel and the reductions that we're going to make there, I mean, our first premise was, for this school year at least, no one is going to lose their job so that we can save money. Right? It's not going to be the budget. The budget is not going to be the reason that you lose your job this year. So we've stuck to that and really have focused on attrition. So we're a growing district, and also in growth a little. We're a growing district, and also people leave for whatever reason, right? They resign or retire, and so we're using those positions to be able to those resignations or retirements to be able to reduce positions. So that's where we've seen probably the most significant savings. So and then also in our budget for next year, when we opened, for instance, when we opened Anetta Elementary, we had 23 new teaching staff on the books. Now, we were growing faster than we are this year, or are projected to grow for next year, and that we have this year. But basically we took the positions that we had budgeted for Lynn McKinney Elementary and reduced those two. So through attrition and reduction of those growth positions, we've been able to save some positions. I talked about that, but we did start at the central level. So at the central office, through attrition again, didn't want anybody to lose their job because of this budget situation. We've cut about 5 positions, a couple of instructional specialists, our transportation director position. We have a help desk technician and an executive assistant at the central office. So those 5, we have those positions we just aren't filling. So those folks have left, and we won't fill those. But as far as teaching positions, it's instructional positions. It's been about 18 positions that we've been able to not grow into or to reduce through looking at schedules and the master schedule and trying to tighten things up.
Okay. And so I think this would be another big question we get is, and we're parents in this district, what will this look like for my family? How will this affect my family? What will I see when I come to school next year? Right.
So the way that we were able to use attrition and reduce some of our staffing is through class sizes. So I think that it's
that's kind of that's a really broad statement.
It is, yeah. Let's define that.
Can you get that?
I should define that.
Yeah,
I should.
Yeah.
So
again, it's better when you can explain than when you have to
it is.
type it out or whatever.
So I think if we're thinking about the child experience, of course, the teacher experience too. What we can expect as parents and teachers is that we'll have larger class sizes. But let's talk about what that means. So what it means is, ideally, we would love to be able to staff our kindergarten classrooms with, 19 students in them, 18 or 19. Well, I think next year, we're going to see more like 22, 23. And then we also know, and this isn't new to us because we're fast growth, so we've been doing this for a while, but we may have to seek some waivers from the state to increase over the 22 mark in the 22 to 1 threshold in an elementary classroom. But what it doesn't mean is and I've spoken to staff about this because this was a big concern for them. It doesn't mean that we take a class of 22 kids in second grade and we push it to 27. Or at the secondary level, we have a class of 29, which is typical, very typical at a secondary level. Lots and lots of students, big students in middle school and high school teachers' classrooms. We wouldn't take a class of 29 and press that to 38. What it really just means is at the margins. I mean, you're not gonna find a class of 16 at the high school. They're going to be much closer to a 30 student number. So that's what class sizes mean. So if a parent's asking, what does this mean for my kid? I think that's probably going to be the biggest impact, a few more students in their classes. And then also we've convened we talked a little bit about travel earlier. We've convened an extracurricular committee to talk about the budget. So these are the people who are coaches and are fine arts directors and run our CTE programs. And we've sat down with them to try to figure out how might we cut some costs there. We've also got this question, what's happening to my particular kid's extracurricular program, right? We have parents who are concerned about their child's program because they value them so highly for their student. So we've talked to them about, I guess what I would say is our goal is to keep all of our programs. And when I say programs, I mean our fine arts, our athletics, our career and technical education student clubs, I mean UIL debate, one act play, all of those. We keep those because we think they're really, really important for our students. And so we keep those. And of course, they achieve really highly. We talked about that at a level that they can achieve highly, but we try to find some ways to reduce expenses. So for instance, for a student, it might mean that there's one less competition that they go to, or they don't stay overnight for that travel. They come home instead so that we don't have to pay for that overnight. So those are probably the types of things. With respect to parents, there may be some additional fees. There are fees that we haven't charged in the past, but other school districts have. It's pretty typical. For instance, like an athletics operation fee, those types of things, they might see some of that. Now, I know some of our programs already have large fees that parents pay. We're not talking about increasing those, but in those places where we haven't been charging fees, but used to in the past, or other school districts typically do, just to sort of defray the cost, not sort of, but to defray the cost of some pretty expensive programs that we have that we think are important. So I think that's what a kid and parent will feel.
Okay. We actually had a question come into our forum. Again, thank you guys for asking questions for this Bearcat Budget 101 Part 2. It was about summer school and what changes the district is making to summer school. Will you review that for me?
Sure. So I think it came from a parent whose child had the opportunity to go to summer school in the last couple of years and won't have that opportunity this summer. So our summer school programming for the last few years, we were really excited to have federal COVID-related dollars. It was grant funding that came in that's gone now. So we had that funding come in. We also, of course, were looking at our kids and watching and looking at the data and seeing that there were gaps, bigger gaps than there had been in the past. And so we were able to put together a more robust summer school program for more students. I will say that we invited a lot more students than came. We have students who are doing other things in the summer, kids who need a break, all of that. But obviously this parent thought it was really valuable, but it's just something that because we don't have that funding anymore, we can't afford to do. So it is something that we knew would likely go away if we had gotten more funding from the state to kind of bridge the gap of losing that funding, then we would be able to do it. But we also knew, I'd like to be clear, that funding was around for 3 years and that it was going to go away. So we knew that it wasn't something that we could rely on. And so it was always, but we just wanted to use it for the best purpose that we could. While we had it. The other thing about interventions for students is we have a very robust system of that within the school day and through win time or flex time. And so it's very specific per student. And so we rely pretty heavily on that because, like I said, we don't have full attendance at summer school for various reasons. And so that's really where we focus that intervention at kids. We find it to be more effective because they're right there with us anyway.
Right.
And it's in the regular course of the school year, and it's a lot more kids.
Yeah. Let's do a quick staff. How will it affect our staff? We have obviously the most amazing staff. And hopefully people, maybe if they talk to, they're all in our community, their friends, whatever. We've communicated with our community several times, but we communicate with our staff really, really consistently in person and email and have forums and all that kind of stuff. So first of all, they've been very gracious. They've also given us a lot of great feedback that has informed how we have done this work and how we have communicated so that it works as best as it can as far as the communication piece. So we have a teaching and learning focus group. So that's a group of teachers who come in. They give us a lot of good feedback. And we've really used that to formulate especially our communications. And so we've done obviously some written communication because they asked us for frequent written communications about kind of those frequently asked questions that were coming up. So we've done that. And then we've also just had in-person opportunities for people to have group meetings or talk to me directly. So that's been a great opportunity to answer their questions. They've been very, very gracious. They love being here. They love serving this community students. And so it's they're willing, even with all the changes, to still be all in. And I think it's going to have an impact on them. If you're a teacher and you have larger classes, it has an impact on you. And so I'm just really, and one of the things that makes people, including us, want to work here is the support of this community. Right. So our teachers and our staff really feel that support, and it is a critical piece of why people stay here and why people choose to come even in the face of these challenges. The other thing, and they've asked this very directly, is this forever? Are these changes forever? And my answer is always, I sure hope not. Right. I mean, I won't expect that it's forever, but we also are fiscally conservative, like we said, and we have to plan for the future. That's what everyone expects us to do and our school board to do. So we will plan that this could go on for some period of time until the legislature makes a decision, and it's only them who can makes a decision to provide more of in the basic allotment to schools. I mean, we're already looking at next year.
We are already looking at next year, right? And dreading it, frankly.
Yes.
Yeah. Really, really, really worried about it. It's a dire situation.
So there may be a part 3 to the Bearcat budget Facebook Live series. That was all I had on our questions that we had and things like that. Did you guys think of anything that we forgot, that we missed?
I don't think so.
You don't think so? We covered all?
Is that long enough, Mercedes?
Yeah, I think
like
so.
that was long enough.
Somebody one time, like our pay, just for instance, another fun fact about the school district. Our payroll each month is about $5.6 million. For those roughly 1,000 employees that we have, it's about $5.6 million a month.
And that's when it just blows my mind still that I didn't know last time that now I know is that, but we're not getting a check for $6 million a month from the state to cover that 5.6 million, which of course isn't all of our expenditures. It's just some of it. And so that just blows my mind. I never knew that. And so I'm glad I learned that. I'm trying to think of what I learned today. I'll have to think about that for a second, but that was the one from the last time.
Learned something, and hopefully the community
Hopefully everybody else did too.
Everybody else has learned something.
Yes,
as well.
that's right. So 16 and a half days?
I think that's what we figured out.
16 and a half days, which, man, it just flies by.
It does.
But this time of year is so exciting. Honor banquet was on Monday night, top 5% for the graduates.
Right.
Elementary schools are having
our special ed dinner theater last night.
Yes, that's right.
Yes, we've got baseball and softball in the playoffs.
Yep, all of our state qualifiers. It's really exciting.
Schools.
Yes, carnivals and end-of-year parties, everything.
Yes.
If you ever want to know how to get in touch with Dr. Bone or anybody in central office, there is a button on the website, aledoisd.org, that is Ask Susan. And if you want to know if Susan actually gets those emails, yes,
I actually get those emails.
And so please, hit that button. Ask your questions. We'll be happy to answer. And hopefully we answered some of your questions today too. And then if you want to know more, really you can go back. If you're like, oh, I just moved here. I didn't see what they were saying a year ago. You can go to aledoisd.org/ledge, LEGE. It'll give you all the communications that we've done since then. We'll actually put this video up. The first video is also up there. We'll put this presentation up. I was going to call it PowerPoint. I think that's really like old school though, right?
It's not a PowerPoint.
Yeah, it's not a PowerPoint. It actually isn't a PowerPoint. It's in Google. And so you can go there and see the presentations. You can fast forward to the parts that you didn't want to, listen to and all that kind of stuff. We'll get it loaded for you probably early next week.
There's also a transparency website out there if you want to know more information about the finances, things like that and stuff.
That's right.
Check that out as well. There's a lot of information there as well.
If you have a numbers brain like Earl, go there.
That's your website.
That's your website.
Yeah.
That is not. I'm not the numbers person. Earl's the numbers person, thank goodness. But as we close out, look at these adorable children, school children. It has been a really great year, though, just because of our commitment of our staff and our community to make sure that kids have a good school year.
And the entire community.
Yeah.
We're grateful.
We are very grateful. And we're grateful that you joined us.
Yes, thank you.
And, maybe we'll reprise this here and I don't know, we'll wait till next school year probably. Leave you guys alone for the rest of the school year here.
Enjoy your summer.
And we'll send out a lot of stuff in the next few weeks just to wrap up the school year, and then we'll start ramping up for the next one. It'll be here before we know it. Well, yep. Everybody, thanks for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thanks, y'all.
Bye.
Bye.